let's talk about one of history's most incredible, yet somehow overlooked characters. This is the story of a man who started with basically nothing, rose up to challenge the mighty Mughal Empire, and in just 6 short years, built a legacy that would last for centuries. This is the story of Sher Shah Suri. I mean, think about it. This is the ultimate underdog story, right? How does a guy with no royal blood, just a small plot of land to manage, completely outsmart, outfight, and defeat a powerful emperor? To figure that out, we have to look way beyond the battlefield. So let's dive in. Okay, so to really get how he pulled this off, we have to travel back to the 16th century Bengal. It was an incredibly wealthy region, but it was also a total mess. The old rulers were losing their grip, and that created this huge power vacuum. And you know what they say about power vacuums. Everybody wants to be the one to fill them. So you've got this chaotic situation, but it really boils down to 3 main players on the board. First, you have the Ghor Sultanate. They're the old guard, the established rulers, but they're getting weaker by the day. Then you've got the Mughal Empire, these powerful invaders sweeping down from the north. And then there's our guy, an ambitious challenger from a neighboring region called Bihar, known at the time as Sher Khan. Right, so who was this Sher Khan? Where did he even come from? Well, he definitely wasn't born a king or a prince. His journey from a local administrator to one of the most feared warlords in the land is really the key to his whole story. Well, his story starts with a different name, Farid Khan. And get this, he wasn't a prince, he was a jagirdar. That's basically the manager of his family's small estate. And this is so important, because it means he learned how to run things from the ground up, not looking down from a throne. He knew how the land, the taxes, and the people actually worked. But he wasn't just some pencil pusher, right? The guy was a legend in the making. The story goes that he got his new name, Sher Khan, which means Tiger Lord, after he killed a tiger with his bare hands. Now, whether that's 100% true, who knows? But the story spread like wildfire, and it built him a reputation for insane bravery and strength. And that's exactly what you needed to get noticed back then. And you can see his career path here, and man, it was a rocket ship. He goes from being a local estate manager to a military adventurer, and he actually learns the art of war from the Mughals themselves. From there, he becomes the top warlord in his home region of Bihar, and then he sets his sights on the big prize, the rich kingdom of Bengal. So once he had Bengal in his grip, you just knew a showdown was coming. A direct clash with the Mughal Empire was pretty much inevitable. This sets the stage for the main event. Sher Khan, the challenger, versus the Mughal emperor himself, Humayun. And this is where he shows he's not just a tough guy, he's a brilliant strategist. First off, Emperor Humayun makes a huge mistake. He gets bogged down laying siege to a fort, giving Sher Khan precious time to lock down his control over Bengal. Then, Sher Khan does something absolutely genius. He fakes a retreat, basically letting Humayun walk into the capital while he circles around and captures the much more strategic Rojas fort. So Humayun is kicking back, enjoying the luxuries of the capital for months, while Sher Khan is busy cutting off his supply lines. By the time the Mughal army realizes they're trapped and tries to leave, it's too late. Sher Khan ambushes them and crushes them, not once, but twice. And boom, that second victory, game over. The Mughal emperor, Humayun, was forced to flee into exile, where he'd stay for more than a decade. Sher Khan marched straight to Delhi, had himself crowned the emperor of Hindustan, and took on his new name, Sher Shah. The estate manager was now an emperor. You know, it's one thing to conquer an empire, but it's a whole other ballgame to actually run it. And this is where Sher Shah's true genius really comes out. His military victories were amazing, yeah, but what he built in the peace that followed was a genuine revolution. So you see this number, 11,600. What's that all about? Well, that's the number of revenue districts, or parganas, that Sher Shah set up across his empire. This just shows you his obsession with detail and efficiency. He wasn't just ruling, he was building a modern state from the ground up. It is just wild to think about what he accomplished in only 6 years. He completely overhauled the empire's infrastructure. He created a fair and predictable land revenue system, which was a game changer for farmers. He standardized all the gold, silver, and copper coins, which made trade way easier and boosted the whole economy. See, he wasn't just conquering, he was connecting. And if you need proof that his ideas were brilliant, get this. His systems were so good that when the Mughals finally came back to power, they didn't get rid of them. they copied them. The famous Mughal emperor Akbar built his legendary administrative system right on top of the foundations Sher Shah had laid. In fact, Akbar's famous finance minister, Toder Mal, actually got his start working for Sher Shah. He literally wrote the playbook that his enemies ended up using. And of course, we have to talk about his most famous project, the Grand Trunk Road. This thing was so much more than just a road. It was the main artery of the entire empire. It meant armies could move fast, trade could flow securely, and messages could get from one end of the empire to the other. And along the way, he built inns for travelers, dug wells, and planted trees. He was building the infrastructure for a civilization. So he's building an empire that was designed to last. He's creating systems that would be used for generations. But there's one thing nobody can control, right? And that's time. I mean, after everything he'd been through, all the battles and schemes, his end was just sudden, almost random. In 1545, only 6 years into his reign as emperor, he was killed in an accidental gunpowder explosion during a siege. All his plans, all his brilliant reforms, just cut short in an instant. So yeah, his dynasty didn't last long without him. His successors just couldn't hold it all together. And the Mughals did eventually return. But it just leaves you with this massive what if, doesn't it? What if he had lived for another 10 or even 20 years? Could his dynasty have survived? How different would the history of South Asia be? It's just a powerful reminder that sometimes the fate of an entire empire can really hang on the life of a single person. Picture this. It's the mid-16th century, and Eastern India is an absolute powder keg. You've got old empires just crumbling away, new powers hungry for a piece of the action, and a massive fight for territory that's about to redraw the entire map. And it all really boils down to one simple but incredibly powerful question. Right? I mean, think about it. What happens when a power that's been around forever suddenly disappears? It doesn't just leave an empty space. No, it creates a vacuum, sucking in anyone and everyone with a bit of ambition and sparking conflicts that are going to shape the next 100 years. And that is exactly what was happening here. As the old Pathan authority out of Delhi started to weaken, you had two major players ready to jump in and fill that space. On one side, the mighty Mughal Empire, and they had their eyes on a very rich prize. On the other, a brand new kingdom rising up in the northeast, built on pure ambition and some serious military skill. So let's start with Bengal. You gotta understand, Bengal was wealthy, it was in a perfect strategic spot, and it had a reputation for being fiercely independent. For the expanding Mughal Empire, it was a piece of the puzzle they absolutely had to have. But actually conquering it? Well, that was going to be a whole lot harder than it looked on a map. I mean, just look at this timeline. It shows you this constant churn of power, right? Afghan rule kicks off in 1538. But less than 20 years later, the whole thing is on shaky ground when the Mughals take back Delhi. This chaos creates the perfect opening for the Karani family to swoop in and grab control, which sets them on a direct collision course with the empire. And this whole conflict really came down to two men. You had Emperor Akbar, the guy who was literally building the Mughal Empire, dead set on bringing all of India under his flag. And on the other side, you have Daud Karani, the young, ambitious Sultan of Bengal, who makes this incredibly bold move and declares independence, which was basically a direct slap in the face to Akbar's authority. And Daud Karani didn't just talk the talk. He went straight on the attack, pushing into Mughal territory. So Akbar sends his general, Munim Khan, to handle it. But the whole campaign just stalls out. See, Munim Khan gets swayed by some fancy gifts from the Sultan and just doesn't make a move. This failure forces Akbar to basically say, fine, I'll do it myself. And the second the emperor shows up on the battlefield, the tide turns, just like that. So with the emperor himself on the field, you'd think it's game over for Daud Karani, right? The Mughals won some huge battles that, on paper should have been the end of it for Bengal. But here's the thing, as we're about to see, winning the battle isn't always the same as winning the war. So in 1575, at the Battle of Tokaroy, the Mughal forces deal this absolutely decisive blow. Daud Karani is defeated, he's forced to submit, and Bengal is officially annexed by the Mughal Empire. On paper, conflict over. You think that's the end of the story? But it wasn't. Not even close. Just 1 year later, Daud Karani gets everyone together for one last desperate rebellion. At the Battle of Rajmahal in 1576, he's defeated again. This time, though, no treaty, no second chances. He's captured, he's executed, and his challenge to the Mughals comes to a violent, final end. And with Dawit's death, that was it. Almost 4 decades of Afghan rule in Bengal, gone. The Mughal Empire had won. Or had it? And this is the absolute key to the whole thing. The victory at Rajmahal was a de jure conquest. Now that's a fancy legal term, but all it really means is on paper. The Mughals had the official legal claim to Bengal, but what was actually happening on the ground was a completely different story. This table right here, this shows you the messy reality of it all. Sure, the empire controlled the big cities, the capitals, the administrative centers, but the countryside, the vast majority of the land, that was still in the hands of local Hindu chiefs and defiant Afghan warlords who were not about to give up. For years, Bengal wasn't really a part of the empire. It was more like a territory under military occupation. Okay, so let's hit pause on Bengal for a second, because while the Mughals are getting totally bogged down in this endless conquest, a completely different story is unfolding just to the northeast. And here, a new kingdom isn't just rising, it is exploding onto the scene. And this is where we meet the Koch Kingdom. It was founded way back around 1515 by Bishwa Sinha in the Kamatapur region, and it started out as just a small local power. But under his sons, it was about to go on an absolutely incredible run of expansion. The engine behind this whole thing was this amazing partnership between two brothers. You had King Narnar, who handled the politics and the leadership, and then you had his brother Shukladwaj, who was an absolute military genius. He was so good, so fast, and so deadly on the battlefield that he earned the nickname Chila Rai, the Hawk Prince. And let me tell you, Chila Rai lived up to that name. We are talking about a lightning campaign of conquest. In 1562, he completely crushes the powerful Ahom kingdom, a major regional player, and even sacks their capital. From there, he just sweeps through Kachar, Manipur, Sylhet, and Tripura. In just a few years, he forces a whole string of kings and rulers to bow to Kak authority. The speed and the scale of it all was just stunning. So this crazy fast conquest creates this powerful new empire in the northeast and completely changes the political map. But the story of the two brothers who built it all doesn't just end with conquest. It ends with a political decision that's, well, pretty much unheard of. King Naranarayan, he looked at this new empire and realized it was just as much his brother's creation as it was his own. And so, instead of jealously guarding his power like most rulers would, he decided to reward his brother's loyalty in a way that was totally unprecedented. He partitioned the kingdom. He split it right in two. The western half, Koch Bihar, stayed with Narnarayan, but the entire eastern half, Karup, he gave to his brother Chilarai to rule. Think about that. This peaceful division created two stable states, which is a massive contrast to the endless rebellions and problems the Mughals were facing just next door in Bengal. And that really brings us full circle, doesn't it? We've seen two totally different ways of building an empire. You have the Mughals, who claimed this huge territory but really struggled to control its heartland. And then you have the Koch kings, who built their empire, consolidated it, and then secured their power through partnership. It leaves us with one final question to chew on. What's the true measure of an empire's strength? Is it the lines on a map, or is it the loyalty and stability you can actually build within your borders?